Hello, my name is Candido Crespo, Visual Arts Education major, class of 2006. Joining me is fellow alumnus Azer Khan. Azer graduated with a bachelor's in computer engineering in 2017 and master's in computer science in 2020 from New Paltz. After graduating in 2017, he worked at a startup specializing in drone swarm technology in the Middle East before joining Siemens as a researcher applying artificial intelligence and robotic automation to advanced sensor systems in power plants and greenhouses. He was chosen to present the Siemens 2020 Plus vision at the CEO Business Roundtable in Washington, D.C., and sparked a collaboration worth over $3 million for his company. Azer left his engineering work in 2019 to pursue a passion for horses and pursue a master's degree. He worked at a horse barn in upstate New York for almost a year, learning about caring, training, and riding horses. Azer recently joined IBM in the offering management program. So Azer, tell me the story of how you arrived at New Paltz.
Well, thanks a lot for having me on, Candido, and shout out to the Career Resource Center at New Paltz, especially Mark McFadden, Elizabeth Dogood, and all the rest. I appreciate having me on. So I grew up in Kingston, New York. I have 7 siblings, first generation. My father moved here from Pakistan about 35 years ago. And he moved to Kingston, New York from New York City. And here he worked in a hospital as a lab director. We lived typical lives around focusing on family life, religion, school, the typical. And I graduated from Kingston High School in 2013 and then attended SUNY Ulster right after. SUNY Ulster is a community college, Ulster County Community College. And there I got an associate's degree in math and science. I became interested in engineering after that, and I transferred to SUNY New Paltz and pursued a degree in computer engineering. Computer engineering, for those who don't know, is a mix of electrical engineering and computer science. We work on things that run your car, the system in your car, what runs on your refrigerator, your heating system, all those things.
All right. So during your introduction and when I was doing a little research, as much as I want to say I'm confident knowing what it is, let's talk about the IBM Offering Management Program. What is it?
So the IBM Offering Management Program is IBM's twist on product management. Many people have heard of product managers, and essentially what they do is work across many different teams, including software development teams, marketing teams, design teams, and their management to make sure a product or offering does well. In IBM's case, the offering management program is a track to becoming a general manager. And essentially what you're doing is looking at a range of IBM offerings and looking at the market, looking at the different teams that are working on those offerings and finding the right way forward. The example I use is like you have an armada of ships and each ship is an offering or a product that IBM has. And the ship has people who are maintaining it in different ways. There's the sailors, there's the rowers, there's all these different people. So that's like the different teams that are used to build an offering. And what an offering manager does is basically he stands or she stands on the prow of that ship and tells it like, okay, he or she helps it navigate. So are we going in the right direction? That's essentially my job, making sure these offerings are going in the right direction.
All right. And so we can't move on without addressing the horses. What's up with the horses?
So in 2019, I was working as a researcher at Siemens and I was burned out. Like I used to put in many hours, more hours than I should have been. And I used to keep in touch with one of my mentors at SUNY New Paltz, and he had since moved on. He was getting his MBA at Cornell, and he was successful in my view. So I was on the phone with him, and I was chatting with him, and he was like giving me this advice and telling me that I'm young, don't get burned out, and I'm going to address this later. But he said that you don't want your life to be some simple trajectory. You want to make it interesting. You want to have experiences. That's how you will become valuable. That's how you'll build self-worth. And he said, like, find something that you're interested in. I don't care if it's volunteering or moving somewhere, doing anything. Find something you're interested in, jump off of your engineering work and go pursue it. So for me, I mean, I loved horses. I always did. I'm really into ancient Arabic poetry, where they always talk about horses and brag about them, essentially. So I wanted to know what it was about, and I showed up at a barn one day and started shoveling.
Oh.
It was a lot of fun. I
You just
learned
got into
so
it.
much.
Oh, that's pretty awesome, man. And so are you still involved in some capacity?
I mean, I've taken a break after
Okay.
COVID and getting adjusted to this new job. But
Okay.
I was riding just about every
Um,
day.
wow. All right. So I want to ask, what's the most rewarding or challenging aspect of your career thus far?
The most challenging aspect of my career, I'd say, is building relationships.
Hmm.
That's what my job is, as I described. Like, I'm working across a lot of different teams, and my position is not a position of authority. It's a position of influence. So I need to convince people to help me. I need to convince them that my view is the right view. And that starts off with, on a very basic level, making them like you and getting along. And that's actually the most challenging thing, because there's such a range of people with so many different experiences. And you have to find a way to relate to every single one, right? When you start to learn how to relate to them, then you can build on that relationship and then start building this give and take kind of thing, right? And then after that, you find value in them and they find value in you. But that is absolutely the hardest. I mean, anyone can make an Excel sheet, anyone can make a PowerPoint, anyone can do those hard skills and learn them, but humans are the most complicated thing. So uh, that's the biggest challenge for sure.
I think I want to expand a little bit on the relationships, on building relationships, because speaking from my personal experience as an educator, I I build my entire career off of building relationships. I think that, to me, that's the most important thing in my classroom, even more important in my content. But in your case, there is a product that you need to deliver. How would you approach building a relationship?
The first thing I do, I mean, when I got on this call with you, I
Yeah,
asked you what your story was.
right.
That's the most important thing to me. In the end of the day, we're both people. We've
Mhm.
both grown up in very different ways. I don't really have many commonalities with you. I mean, you described that you're an art educator and you are a third generation immigrant and things like that. And so for me, it's just asking what their story is, and then that leads to sharing mine, and then you build this commonality and this kind of like human connection,
Right.
and then you build on that. So for me, that's what building relationships is. That's where I start.
Okay. In 2017, did you see yourself here?
Absolutely not. I mean, I was finishing my engineering degree, and the world just revolved around software and coding and very technical things. And I'm not a very technical person. I mean, if I put in the effort, then I saw that I produced decent things, but definitely not like genius in coding or anything like that. Pretty
Okay.
average. And so I realized that I had to differentiate myself somehow. And I was decent at talking and communicating. So I would always try to put myself in situations where I took advantage of that. And it worked out well, but I'm telling you, I didn't expect it. Not at all.
uh, um, we know a little bit about your journey of how you transferred from occupation and moved on. Is there anything about that journey that we might be missing from how I introduced you?
There was a lot of failure. Um, I would apply to, at one point, I wanted a PhD, and I applied to different schools. I applied to Princeton. I was invited to visit the research team and everything. I was optimistic,
Yeah.
but that was a big knock. Another time, I wanted an MBA. I think that was in late 2018, 2019, but I just couldn't crack that exam. I mean,
Wow.
to get into those top 10 schools, you need a good grade. So being very candid and open with you, I mean, those are huge failures for me, or so I thought, right? And that's the point I want to give, that you think you're failing and you think that it's the end of the world when some application doesn't go through, or some decision you wanted to happen doesn't actually play in your direction. I mean, but that's not the case. Just stay true to the course, be patient, and good things will happen. In my journey, there's a lot of ups and downs. I learned a lot from the downs. I mean, one thing I can say though is that, or advice I can give is that whenever you're given an opportunity, you need to ruthlessly take advantage of it. There is no time for you to be sitting and thinking like, comparing yourself to others, or like getting in your own head. You just got to attack and maximize your strengths. Yeah.
Love that. Yeah. All right. Would you agree that there were lessons you learned at New Paltz that helped transform you into the person you are today?
Definitely. There's two things I want to bring up in this case. The first thing is that I learned that I'm worth it, right? I came from an immigrant background, first generation, all that, with all the baggage that comes with it. I wasn't in that pipeline to get to the top school and things like that. Like, that wasn't for me. So I had a hard time realizing that I'm actually valuable and building that self-worth. When I got to New Paltz, I was given opportunities that made me understand that I'm actually worth it. And I'll describe that in a second. And the second thing I learned in my time at New Paltz was that there's a unique spot in the world that was made just for me. And that is for everyone. There's a spot for you. And you're just gonna find it. I mean, you keep building on the personality you were born with and you are gifted with, and you're gonna find yourself in that great spot. So how do I come to the first conclusion? It was in senior year when I realized I was worth it. I worked on a senior design project where I had an idea that it was during those SpaceX rave time period. So there was a lot of space rockets going up. Everyone loved Elon Musk and all that. And I was thinking like, I want to like have an idea to colonize Mars and the moon. And I thought and came to this concept where I envisioned a lot of like drones being put into space rockets and being sent into outer space. And then from this command center on board the rocket ship, they would be sent out and work collaboratively to like construct 3D buildings and structures. So I made this prototype for it, and it was working. There was this robot arm and stuff that was actually building things. And I applied to a conference at MIT hosted by IEEE, which is the Engineering Society, and I was accepted. That was a shock. And then they invited me to give like this lightning talk there about my work. And so I found myself at MIT like a month later in this packed room, like this conference room, giving a presentation on my idea. I met all the students there. They were just like, you need to go talk to Elon Musk. I was like, what are you talking about? How can I do that? But for them, it was like obvious. Like he was like, oh, just tweet him. He'll respond. I mean, they were smart kids. They like had this audacity about them, right? I didn't have that. And so I was like, I thought about that a lot. I met a professor there, and after I got back home and finished the presentation, I called him on Zoom. And he remembered me and stuff, and we spoke on Zoom. I remember he got onto the call like 15 minutes late, and I think I like apologized for him being late. Like I was that insecure about who I was, right? And so he told me like, you're worth, like he took this personal aside and said, you're worth it. Don't apologize to people for like their own issues. Like you need to be strong and firm and believe in your own self-worth. That was big. That was probably a life changer for me. Like I remember I was sweating and like it was intense that day. It was in the Student Union building, 4th floor. I remember I found this spot and called this guy. And I don't want to go on too long, but my unique spot in engineering school, I mean, I noticed in like senior year and in junior year that there were a lot of students in engineering and they wouldn't necessarily talk to each other. There was a very bad like, I mean, everyone's awkward in engineering. I think that's pretty common knowledge. So they needed someone to bring them together. And
Yeah.
I had this idea for an engineering cafe. So
Okay.
engineering students will work on like coding, right? But me, like, I wanted to work on this really social thing. And I had to like communicate with the director for Sodexo and all those things. And I brought this engineering cafe onto the floor, basically. People were
Okay.
coming in, meeting new people or meeting their classmates, and the proceeds from it were funding engineering events in the engineering department. So like I found and thought to myself that this experience really makes me realize that there's a spot for me. Like who else was going to do that except me
Right.
in that specific circumstance? So those are two things I definitely learned.
Wow. Those are so valuable that I wrote them down while you were talking about them, while you're talking about them as well. So if you see me fall, my eyes got dropping down to the paper, it's because I'm writing. So for me, when I arrived at New Paltz, I experienced culture shock in the I had never been on my own. I had never been so independent. And the community, all the people, all the ethnicities, everything about it was a culture shock for me. Did you experience something like that? And do you think it played a role in you developing that community?
I think I did experience a culture shock.
Okay.
Uh, it was interesting. I mean, I
Mm,
didn't know anyone, and I had no friends when I first got there, and there was such a range of viewpoints and perspectives,
right.
and I wasn't necessarily familiar with that. It wasn't normal to me, so I had to like really get out of my comfort zone and
Hmm.
learn to get along with all types of people. And I remember on the lines of like diversity and inclusion, President Christian had this diversity and inclusion council, which I was a part of. I was one
Okay.
of two student representatives on it, where SUNY had mandated that they develop this charter for diversity and inclusion on campus. And I mean, those are some steps I took to like break out of my shell and become comfortable, right? Those are things that I did.
All right. I think we're still, this next question probably still moves in the direction of you telling us your story. So there are two words that I am particularly interested in, and the first being success. Can you define that for me?
That's a really good question, and I'm going to say that I won't define it
Okay.
because I think success is defined by yourself, by you.
Mm,
What do you believe success is? I think it's not what your parents think it is. It's not what your siblings think it is, your friends, your classmates, society. It's what you think. And I struggled a lot with that. I mean, I used to just go with the tide and say that, oh, success is whatever, becoming this super awesome engineer. And then I would like try to attain that. But that's not what success is necessarily. I mean, for me, it's experiencing life and all that. It's my own definition. So I say that you got to introspect, you got to think about it deeply, and ask yourself questions like, what makes you happy? What makes me happy? What would I be proud of being in 5 years from now? Uh, and then more deeper questions like, what influence do my surroundings have on me? And do I agree with them? Like, those are questions I would ask. Uh, Career wise, I'm cautious to get into my own definition, but I'll just say, I
sure.
mean, what I find enjoyable about life and when I feel like I've made it is back to those that point I made about relationships.
Hmm.
I love listening to someone's story. Any opportunity basically that I have to hear someone's story, I'm jumping on it.
Right.
And I think that it's important to learn to communicate clearly and with empathy and from a place of understanding, right? For
Okay.
me, like those are, if I am really good at that, I'm successful. That means I can talk to anyone, learn anything. Uh, yeah, I mean, one thing I do spend a lot of time doing is learning new things, and I
Okay.
mean, as evident by the horses, and
Yeah.
I don't, that's just what I enjoy. I mean, personally, but I think every person has to do their own thinking, come up to
Hmm.
their own conclusion on that question.
Right. Right on. Yeah. I don't. I didn't try to answer this question on my own. So I just. So this is me just listening to you. Are you a person that thinks that journey is more significant than the end goal?
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay.
Uh, Oftentimes the end goal doesn't really mean anything, and when you get there,
Mm,
it's just like, oh, okay, cool, I'm here now.
right.
But it's just fun to be on that journey and have like some personal goal in mind. That's
Sure.
fun. That's enjoyable. And uh, I love failing too, to be honest. I don't
Okay.
like succeeding too much. Like I was telling someone recently that it makes me feel weird. Like if I'm succeeding too much and things are going too well,
Yeah.
I don't like it. Like I want some challenge in life. I want some excitement. Nothing too extreme,
No.
but
Right.
some challenge along the way. I enjoy that. I remember I used to play soccer uh, in high school and in varsity and then in college for a year. And I didn't do well. Like I wasn't a good soccer player at all.
Oh.
I think I was a forward and I scored like 3 or 4 goals probably in my whole career.
Okay.
Right. Like I was bad. And I realized that I didn't even enjoy the games. I enjoyed like practicing for the games. I
Oh.
would do really
All
well
right.
in practice. I mean, uh, or like I enjoyed working out in the gym and like preparing. But when
Mm.
game day came, it was just like, oh, okay, I don't really care that much.
No.
Uh, I am better at other things. I mean, but that's a good example, I think, of like
Yeah. Yeah.
me
Yeah.
enjoying the journey more. And eventually, like I only worked out. I forgot about the whole game stuff, and I just work
Okay.
out. Yeah,
Okay. Well, I guess you had to. It was a lived experience, right? You wouldn't have known what was more significant to you if had you not gone through that journey. Let's
exactly.
keep going. The next word that I think is important is fulfillment. What do you think?
Uh, Again, very personal to each and every person, but I will say for me, I find fulfillment in family, spending time with family, and just being close to them, right? In religion, I'm a pretty practicing spiritual person, and I like tasting the wind in different parts of the world. That's what
Ah,
I enjoy. I find
interesting.
fulfillment in that, and uh, for others, it might be something else. And uh, I think it's critical to understand deeply, think deeply about what you find fulfillment in. And I keep repeating that because it's so important. Uh,
Yeah.
uh, a lot of people don't stop to think about what they're doing. They're in such a rush to get somewhere, and they don't even believe deep down that they really should or want to do that. So that's something I recommend, and that's something I try to do myself.
Yeah. So I can't. It's hard for me to move on past these two questions because I keep thinking about how these questions are so personal, and I'm going to be thinking about it, after our conversation, uh, because I do want to define it on my own, and yeah, like you said, it while you were talking about your answer, I didn't find myself saying, oh yeah, it's that, because of my own personal story. All right, let's move on a little bit. So I'm a firm believer as an educator in the role of mentorship in our lives. I believe you are as well. What advice would you give to our viewers and listeners who are interested in your field?
Interested in my field, bunch of things. So in my field, many people come from STEM backgrounds, others come from marketing backgrounds, others come from communications, and it's a wide range. I mean, I know people who were previously voice actors, I know people who were previously singers, and they found a place in this offering management, product management. There's a few things I would say. Firstly, uh, learn how to communicate. That's
Mm,
first and foremost. Um, and what that means is understanding the role of like empathy and listening in conversations, and apply it all the time and everywhere. There's no on-off switch to communication. You always got to be on your best, and you always got to improve that. Whether things are going good, whether things are not going good, make sure you put in effort all the time to communicate better, and always think like, how could I have said that better? How could I have communicated that better? How could I have listened better? Maybe you're not being empathetic sometimes. So are there times where I can be more vulnerable? That's the first thing. And then I'd say after you learn how to communicate, the second thing would be to build your story. So everyone has been to college. Most people with the blessing of going to college have been to college, right? It is a privilege. We have to acknowledge that. Absolutely. And there's those commonalities, and there's some things that everyone has done. And there's I think there's an importance in differentiating yourself somehow. So you need to consider like, how can I build my story? Don't do things just to like check them off some bucket list, because people will detect that immediately. But instead, think about things you enjoy doing and then get really good at them. You probably enjoy them because you are already good at them. So just get even better, and then slowly build your story in that way. No one really cares, honestly, about whether you have A's or you're societally considered smart. I mean, that only gets you like 5 minutes into the relationship, and then like, okay, now what? Like, who are you? So that's really important, building that story. When I think of my own job, I'm usually sharing my own experience, just laughing, having fun. And part of it is then like working, right? But most of the time, I'm telling you, it's just getting to know the other person, building that relationship. So that's the basis, and it will make someone want to talk to you. If you're building that story, people want to talk to you. The third thing I would say is, after you build your story, after you have a few experiences, share it wide, be proud of it, and embrace your uniqueness. No one has a story that is exactly like yours. Yours is special in that specific way. So there will be times when other people's stories sound more exciting and fun and all that, but that's okay. Your story is unique. That is something you just need to come to terms with and accept and embrace. And lastly, one thing I did is I reached out to people who I wanted to emulate. Now, I didn't want to be exactly like they were in all aspects of life, but they had a few good traits that I really liked. And frankly, they worked at companies that I one day wanted to work at, right? Because it does take some kind of intelligence and uniqueness to get to those positions. So I reached out. And I don't mean just reaching out randomly, but intentional networking. And for example, you go on LinkedIn, you don't just add everyone. You add people whose stories actually resound with you and you relate to. And then after that, I'd say reach out to family members who have experience. Reach out to family friends, hear their story, understand their background. A person doesn't always have to be societally successful, quote unquote, to give you valid advice. That's something I learned, that people learn and have a lot of practical wisdom to share. So just listen. And I'd say the bonus, always ask for advice. I remember in New Paltz, I was calling people at like these crazy companies and just like sitting and just talking to them and asking for their advice on my future. And you're not always like taking their advice and doing something with it, but what it does is that in essence, you're hearing their story, you're hearing their perspective. And what that will do is like create this treasure vault of advice you have. It's going to keep building and building. And it's really special because these people are special that you're talking to. And over time, you're going to like find yourself like pulling on those experiences, whether you feel it or not, right? It's going to shape your mindset. It's going to shape your whole philosophy and way of thinking, so that when you're in circumstances where you might have needed that advice, it's easy. You've kind of been there, done that through someone else's shoes. So that's big. Always ask for advice. And for students out there, reach out to people who you want to emulate, who have some good traits that you want to learn, and introduce yourself. be very honest about who you are. And then when you get on the phone with them, ask them about them,
Yeah.
and they'll be willing to share. People love to share their own story and talk about themselves.
I can attest to that because you surprised me when we first started this conversation and you asked me because like I said, this conversation was going to be solely on you. So when you asked that, it made me feel a lot more comfortable, and it sort of just dropped that stranger veil that would have been masking this conversation, had you not asked me. So I appreciate that.
No problem.
The last question that I have is it's important. It's important, almost bundling everything that we've talked about so far, building relationships, community, the culture shock we may have experienced when we first got to campus. So when I think about my time at New Paltz, I think about the people who impacted me. Is there any standout faculty or staff member that had an effect on you?
There's a lot.
Yeah.
I'll go through a few. I think I mentioned the Career Resource Center. There's Mark McFadden. He was such a supportive person. And, I told him like, oh, I'm working with horses now and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And at face value, those are not good or smart career moves. But this guy was so supportive. And I want him to know that anytime I would talk to him, he just had this big smile on his face, be like, wow, that is so cool. And it would really like motivate me to keep going. Another faculty member that I sought mentorship from in undergrad and graduate, he's no longer a faculty member, his name is Rajiv Narayanan from the computer engineering department. And this guy, he was insane. Like his work ethic and the way he like operated just impressed me. So he went to IBM Research, which is like IBM's research arm working on like cutting edge technology, after he was a professor. He worked there for a few years and then he went to Cornell University to get his MBA. Now he's like a director at a large pharmaceutical company. He's a big shot now. And this guy like took risks. He quit his job at IBM to get that MBA. He did like all these crazy things. And from my perspective and the way I saw what a career is, he just seemed like so outrageous. And that's what attracted him to me, to be honest. One big experience I have from this guy is that, and I kind of mentioned it before, when I was in burnout, I called him and he said that, Azer, people go to high school and graduate, and then they go to get their bachelor's degree and they graduate and maybe get a master's or a PhD. And then they find a partner in life. They have some kids, they live their days, and then they die. Is that what you want to be? And I know it's grim and all that, but that was like a big statement there. Do I want my life to be that simple? And do I want to avoid risk taking to that level? And like, for me, the answer is clearly no. Like, no, not doing that.
Right.
And so that's what prompted me and continues to motivate me to take these risks and just step out of my comfort zone. I will randomly call him up, ask him a question, or just ask how he's doing. And the big lesson from that for any students listening is that two things, actually. I wouldn't have found this guy. And I mean, he was going to be who he was going to be, regardless of whether I contacted him. I think he's extremely successful now, but I needed to take that first step. I needed to seek his mentorship, and then he was going to give it. No one's going to like come to you and like be like, hey, Azer, I want to help you. Like, no one does that. You need to be seeking help, and then someone will go and help you. And the second thing is, be very deliberate about who you choose to be your mentor. When I think of mentor, like there's a lot of people you talk to, but a mentor is someone who's a little closer than that. They're actually investing their time in you. They're leaving a part of their legacy in who you are, right? And so be very deliberate about who you choose. Not all mentors are right for you. In this case, he was right for me because he challenged me to leave my comfort zone. That's what I needed. I didn't need someone to say, oh, keep going as you are and like get smarter, get better at coding. Like, he never told me things like that. And I didn't need to hear that because that wasn't my strength. And so he played to my strength and just trusted the process and was like, leave that comfort zone. And and I did, and things worked out for me.
Man, you're giving and sharing so many nuggets. I can't wait for other people to hear this conversation. Um,
Thank you.
we are approaching the end of our conversation, and I can't imagine. I'm sure you are. You have something else to give. So, are there any parting words that you would like to share?
Uh,
Because I mean, you shared plenty.
I mean, one thing I will say that bothered me a lot was
Okay.
Sometimes I would be expecting things that I wasn't ready for. I would want something and I just wasn't ready for it. I didn't have the. One of my mentors told me, maybe this will make the point like clear. He said that
Okay.
he's a vice president at General Motors, and he said to me that, Azer, you want to build life skills early on in your career. Those basic skills of communication and a few hard skills, know how to like make PowerPoints and Excel sheets and maybe code a little if you need to, but build those skills and prepare yourself for that big job in the future. That's what you're really doing. You're just making yourself be that perfect candidate for when that big job shows up. And many times, like we just try to jump from place to place and think like, oh, this is the big job. We just do it for like a 10% increase in our salary or something like that. But instead, what I advise and what I try to do is just be a little more pragmatic and focus on building yourself early on. From like 18 years old until like 27, I'm still in the phase. Building myself, and then take those risks, and then like just like take that extra step to succeed. I mean, in however way you feel, build that career.
Well, appreciate you spending time with us. Thank you for sharing your story, taking some time to reminisce, and exemplifying what it means to soar higher.
Yeah, for sure. Just remember that we all fail, and that's the fun part. We can laugh about it later.
Thank you, Azer. We look forward to hearing more from you.
For sure. Thanks a lot.